I've been looking at several of the Robert Adams websites on the internet and how people talk to each other. And what I've noticed is that the advice people give each other is usually something to the effect, remember what Robert says, you don't exist, the world doesn't exist. And this is often said because someone mentions some sort of distress he or she feels about a certain situation. And they're telling the advice people are saying, pay no attention to your problems. You don't exist. The world doesn't exist. They repeat Robert's words as complete understanding. And if you understand this, you will no longer feel the distress or the problem you felt. But this is complete bullshit. These people are merely mouthing Robert's teachings that say, don't react to the world, stay in silence, and all your problems will go away, and you'll get happier and happier. Well, this wasn't the case with Robert. After he had his awakening at age 14, he was very distressed because he didn't know what was happening to him. His mother sent him to psychiatrists. He felt very confused and bewildered by what happened to him. And it began his lifelong search for truth or confirmation. Supposedly, he went to India in 1947 and met Ramana. And Ramana revealed to him the truth about the nature of his existence. But then why did Robert spend another 37 years, so he says, wandering around visiting various teachers in India, especially years later? Like he said, he spent 6 months with Nisargadatta. At the time that Balsikar was with Nisargadatta, in the last 3 years of Nisargadatta's life, which would be 1978 to 1981. If Robert had his awakening at age 14 and his confirmation by Ramana at age 18, what was he doing at Nisargadatta's house 40 years later or 30 years later? Just doesn't make sense. He had his awakening when he was 14, but he was with Nisargadatta 28, 42, trying to figure out 47. But he spent at least 30 years traveling to various other teachers in India afterwards. So it's really easy to say, just don't pay any attention to the world. Don't let it touch you. Don't react to it. And gradually you'll get happier and happier. These are bullshit teachings. It didn't work for him. He kept thinking and traveling and listening to teachers and being around teachers for another 30 years. So where did he settle in on this idea of don't react to the world? And he backed it up with his teachings that you don't exist because the I does not exist, whatever that meant for him. And since I don't exist, the world doesn't exist. Now, this falls back to my experience with him in 1995. I found out by looking within that there was only emptiness and I did not exist. And without the I, everything else was nonsense. Without an I, without an existence as a person, your own life and those of others mean nothing. And with that point of view, it's easy to discount anything in existence as being important. But let me say this. If Robert, after his awakening, was still spending 30 years circulating in India, seeking further knowledge or understanding, as he put it, to make sure he didn't miss anything, there is still a vacancy in him, a hole, a worry, a feeling of incompleteness that drove him to seek out other teachings, be with other teachers. He was not at rest. But you can't have those experiences like there is no I and therefore I don't exist as a person. Or the world is without meaning when you have an experience like that. But that doesn't mean that that enlightenment is going to last you very long before you start wandering again, looking for something else. The teachings that Robert is talking about in Nisargadatta, very subtle. They're conveyed in words, which means they're conveyed in concepts. And concepts always cause confusion. But I'm not confused about the sound of that leaf blower outside. Can you hear me? So, I say, seeking the teachings of Robert, which talk about being quiet and silent and don't react to the world is from a point of view, teachings of somebody that's running far away and is frightened of emotions and problems in the world. They're nihilistic teachings. Jesus Christ, he's right outside the door with that fucking blower. I hope the sound is fully conveyed to you as it is to me. It's not a problem. I'm quiet about it. It doesn't disturb me. I'm totally untouched by that fucking noise outside my fucking door. Make it impossible to talk. See how deeply I've learned Robert's lesson? To me, it's very recent. You know, you read Powell's book, The Ultimate Medicine, and his other two books. And it's very clear that Maharaj didn't or wasn't the same person as he was 5 years before he learned that he had cancer. He said once he heard the word cancer, everything changed for him. And he only focused on the absolute at that point because he didn't want to have anything to do with the body or with consciousness. He makes that very clear. I am not the body. I am not consciousness, not even consciousness. He was running away. He said he hoped that when he died, consciousness would not be putting him to too much of a bother. He wanted to die in his sleep. He says that quietly, without a whimper. I say he was a coward. And anything he said should be taken with a grain of salt. The wishes of a frightened man who is dying. And instead of embracing the teachings of Advaita, like Nisargadatta or Ramana or Robert, these teachings are very subtle and very much depend on an intellect. While the teachings to follow are those about finding the divine. Looking inside of yourself and finding the energies of the life force. Perhaps reading Richard Gordon's book on healing hands and practicing the exercises therein to begin feeling energies in your body. To start feeling energies in your hands just by concentrating on them. In your fingers. And gradually over time to become aware of all the energies in the body. All the movements of energies in the body. And to begin to feel the energies inside of yourself. After a while, not the coarse energies of the healing energies and the ones that you can feel within you and around you as a sense of presence. But after the awareness of those energies has decreased, you become aware of the source of those energies, which is the life force. It's hard to describe what the life force is like. But for me, when I first felt it, it was as a sense of enormous power arising out of my gut with a brilliant white light that lit everything up and exploded. And I had years of bliss after that, great happiness. But after a while, the fires died down. But I was no longer the same Ed Music after that. The fires died, but left me in a different dimension, a dimension of the divine. The ordinary world wasn't there anymore. The world of working every day and concentrating on your work, meeting schedules, and having to concentrate intensely. I had to think up psychiatric rebuttals to other psychiatrists' reports about our patients at our clinic that said the jobs did not contribute to any pathology they were feeling now. They always said that it was pre-existing or they weren't really suffering from pathologies, etc. And I had to write reports refuting the evidence that they presented. And this was quite a bit of concentration. And I hated it because I became so contracted, focused down, like Michael is on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And Vasilina is on being in medical school and the shit she has to go through there and her contempt and hatred for the school. But with the ending of my employment there, I was just able to rest inside my body, inside my consciousness, which had been burnt pure by the years of energies inside. And I was on a moment by moment relationship with the life force, which changed over the years from being this great and glorious being inside of me, this all-powerful force of life, to now I experience the life force like a big puppy in the center of my being, a puppy who loves me, and I love the life force. I'm in no hurry to lose my relationship with the life force. And I heartily recommend everybody in our Sangha to forget about Robert and Nisargadatta, except to read them and be aware of them. Because they always take you back to some of the most important things, which is like, you're not the body. And the step that comes after recognizing that you're not the body is to begin to realize that you're the combination of the life force and of consciousness that's aware of what the life force is doing, including the creation of the world. My existence in a body has two spiritual aspects: the life force and consciousness, which witnesses the life force. And beyond that is the absolute. But the absolute is something I wouldn't wish on anybody, because once you start trying to identify with the absolute or find the absolute, you begin losing parts of yourself, which before were so precious, like the experience of God within and the life force. It drove Bernadette Roberts sort of mad for losing her relationship with Christ and God consciousness. So I don't recommend anybody following the teachings of Robert or Nisargadatta or Ramana until at least they've realized God inside themselves. And this kind of awakening happens by paying attention to the energies within oneself, playing with them, knowing them, feeling the bliss that they can cause, the healing energies and everything else, and doing it for a long, long time until they become such a part of you that you're no longer in the ordinary world, the mundane world, but you've realized that you're consciousness, not the body. You're the life force, not the body. And you are the life force and consciousness. And all kinds of realizations come out of this, like the world flows from you. And it's hard to exactly get into this, but it's more like you realize that if it wasn't for you and your nervous system, the world would not exist. So in a sense, you're an essential component for the existence of the universe. Without you, there would be no show. There would be no awareness of the universe or of your own existence as a body and consciousness and the life force. It's not that you create it, but you're an essential feature in the existence of the world, the perception of the world, the perceiving of the world. And it's such a mystery because at the same time, your body is part of that world. But you and your nervous system creates the world while being the one that projects it, so to speak. And the two most important components of that is the life force within, which you have to gain acquaintance with. Because it's not of this world. It's functioning in this world, but it's not an object in this world. It's an object within you, which is prior to the world. The same thing with consciousness. Consciousness is not of this world, but it contains the world. It gives the space for the world to be displayed to you, whoever you are and whatever you are. And after you know the life force and become friends with the life force, first by worshiping the life force, and then just living with him or her over a long period of time till you become comfortable friends, you realize that neither the life force nor you are of this world. You are living in the divine world, while even you appear to everybody else to be in the mundane world. But you're not really of the mundane world anymore. You live in heaven, compared at least with what you were in the mundane world, all tied up in knots about all kinds of things.
Call from name unavailable.
I can't block that one. This is the phone that was given to me to replace the one that couldn't block numbers that I had before. Find God first. And you find God first by finding the energies in you and then going deeper and finding the life force, which is the source of those energies. And the quickest way to do that is through loving. It happened to me by loving another. But then by loving another, I recognized that that love was created by me while looking at the other and worshiping the other. So I was love itself. And recently that's been shown to me again with regard to my cat Kali. My depression at her death pulled me deep down inside myself, where I was once again pulled into that field of complete love, which you might say is the essential quality of consciousness itself, or of the life force. It's hard to say which is which. They're more or less two aspects of the same thing. But that love is for all sentient beings, including yourself. Including yourself. You all have access to seeing the life within you, the life force and the personal aspect that you are also. The Vesselina part of the life force, or the Bernadette part of the life force, or the J part of the life force. The life force is in you, like your elder brother. And after a while it becomes like your puppy that you love with all your heart. And the life force loves you back with all of its heart. And you feel the peace of that love, the rest of that love, the completion of that love. And you're no longer in the mundane world. Then when you've attained that for a while, you can start looking into the teachings of Nisargadatta and Robert Adams and begin to understand them, not from the point of view of a kindergarten in spirituality, but somebody that's reached graduate school of spirituality. When you're in kindergarten of spirituality, I say it's most important to worship, surrender, love yourself, love others, until you begin to feel the forces within, the energies within, and let them purify you for a while until you're able to find yourself not as your body, but as the life force within, and the awareness of that life force within. Only then, after years of doing that, should you worry about the teachings of Robert Adams or Nisargadatta. Although reading them from time to time will help you so much from removing so many of the concepts that block you from even the simplest understanding in spirituality. Right now, there is somebody that writes me a lot. He's a beginner in spirituality. And for him, it's all about understanding concepts. He always begins by quoting something I said 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or last week. And then bringing that back to the concept of infinity and the absolute, and trying to understand those two concepts from some point of view of his own, where he's very stuck on those two words and those two concepts. But spirituality is so much bigger than those two concepts, and he's stuck on them over and over and over again, trying to understand a definition, a proper definition of infinity and the absolute. And he struggles with it, and he can't let go. He can't just drop it. He can't become dumb as a rock, and most of us can't do that either, because we spend our whole life learning, depending on the mind. VJ can't let the mind go for a second. It's always there talking to him, entertaining him. And he wants that entertainment, because without that entertainment, he doesn't know he's alive. So he thinks it's beyond his power to end his mind. But it's not. He just likes being hounded by the mind. He's familiar with it. Why give it up? I love you all, so that's why I'm giving you the advice. Don't pay much attention to Robert and his teaching of quietness, or Nisargadatta. Nisargadatta was a very advanced spiritual teacher who was running away from death by cancer. So don't listen to him. Listen instead to those who followed Muktananda and experienced all those states of consciousness and love and surrender and energies, the energies that purify, the love that you are, and so on. And then after doing that for 10 years or so, then you can turn your attention to Nisargadatta and Robert, but not till then, because you won't be able to understand them. You will not be mature enough to understand them, or even why one would want to take that point of view. Instead, only focus on what's inside of you, the life force, and the consciousness, which is the house or the screen upon which all the images and sounds and tastes and touch are manifested. Try grasping the entirety of consciousness at once and gripping it and loving it. So that's my warning. Stay away from Robert and Nisargadatta and their talks about the absolute, the void, and all of those things. Those are not things to be fooled around with by beginners. You should first have God realization before you get into that study. And by God realization, I mean transcending your identification with your body to identify with the life force and with consciousness. To experience the bliss of the life force, the samadhis of the life force, loving others, feeling surrender to someone or something, becoming humble, becoming quiet in humility, and loving deeply, surrendering deeply. This is the, you might say, the wet kind of spirituality that's drenching in emotion and love, bliss, while Robert and Nisargadatta are the very dry aspects of spirituality. After all the wetness has dried up, all the emotions have dried up, and you're tired of the world and what it has to offer. Maybe you think you're tired of the world now, but it's probably not true. You're probably more afraid of the world and running away for that purpose, like Nisargadatta runs away from his cancer-ridden body. Just love yourself. But to do that, you have to find yourself, which means feeling around inside for the movements of the energies inside of you, especially those energies around near your heart, where your center of consciousness needs to rest in order to rest in the life force, which has its seat there, not as a single crystalline entity, but as a huge force that occupies a lot of space, but gradually becomes tamed and loving like a puppy. I love you all. I love you all. Does anybody have any questions?